Hey man,
Yep, can you hear me?
absolutely. Thanks for pushing this back 5 minutes, by the way.
Oh,
Just take us away with what you've got.
there's no big deal. I figured my kiddo would fight me going to sleep tonight. All right, so basically, the way that I like to debate is anything that's brought up, it's brought up for a reason that obviously does pertain somehow. So if it seems like it might be a little off track, you're obviously wanting to bring it up for some purpose, go ahead and do so. And but we'll have to bring it back in at some point. That's
Hmm.
pretty much it. So anyway, we're here to talk about the Second Amendment as necessary, and without it, we lose all of our other rights, essentially. Here in the US is what we fear. Okay. And the reason why I stand on that is because historically speaking, like in genocides all throughout history, like in 1929, the Soviet Union did did gun control, and they killed 20 million political dissidents. 1911, then Turkey did it, and from 1915 to 17, 1.5 million Christian Americans, or sorry, Armenians, were rounded up and then killed. And the list just goes on and on and on. But where the pretense of my view of it is without the Second Amendment there to make us able to protect our other rights, then if you take away one, the key one, what's the problem from taking away the rest? Which is where it stands. So if you'd like to go ahead and put your point of view.
All right, sure. I mean, I guess from what you said, it just kind of chalks up to correlation does not equal causation, because there are many, many more countries which have instituted gun control and not been overrun. So most of the Western world would be my examples. If you want to get specific, I suppose Australia is a good one. Um, so I guess my question to you would be, given that there have been lots of countries which have instituted gun reform, a minority of which has slid into tyranny, why is it that the minority of cases is the thing which you think is the most representative of the consequences of gun control?
Well, another thing that I stand on is if you look at the gun ban statistics that have been taking place in, let's say, Europe, England, and Ireland, Australia, and all that, mostly what happens is, and what seems to be the trend is that when it comes to gun control, there's always a huge spike in crimes relating to guns. And then many years later, it starts to go down. And in most cases, it levels out to what it was just before the ban. Okay. And if you take Ireland, for instance, it had a huge spike, it had a huge drop. And then since then, it has only continued to climb. Sorry.
Right. But that, okay, the two things. One, that's not really the topic.
Mhm.
Because what you're trying to prove is that it's necessary for other rights. The crime rate is somewhat irrelevant to that. But secondly, it's also just demonstrably untrue. Like crime across all Western nations has pretty much been on a steady decline, trending downwards throughout time. And that's for like a number of reasons, to do with just like better law enforcement and like prosperity increasing generally. So to say that like that would, what you said was is that in Australia our crime spiked and then leveled back to where it was. But that would infer that the crime level in Australia now is the same as what it was pre-gun control, which is absolutely untrue. Like, and you can just look it up, like crime
Yeah.
rates over time, they're all declining. So I don't really understand how you could possibly be under the impression that the crime rate is the same as it was pre-gun control.
This is based off crime research organization, is where I got that detail from.
Right. Well, the Australian Bureau of Statistics is pretty clear that the crime rate is
Yeah.
going down. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
But surely you know this, of like this is fairly well known stuff, about how like often the critique of the media is the whole, that they make it look like there is more crime going on than there actually is.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, most definitely.
yeah, and the kind of one of the key stats which that criticism always cites is that crime is trending downwards, but media coverage is trending upwards. So I don't see how you could simultaneously believe that, but also believe that crime is the same as it was pre-gun control.
Just based on what I've seen and what I've been able to find here. That's
Okay.
where I get my stuff. Like I don't live there. I don't live in these places. So I could not definitively say anything.
Yeah, but I mean, just because I live in Australia doesn't mean that I know the crime rate intimately.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, we're both looking up the same internet.
Oh, I
like,
know.
like
Yeah.
I touch the earth and I'm in tune with it. Yeah.
All right. But as far as the Second Amendment goes here in the U.S., okay,
Yeah.
we are a country that was founded on that being one of our primary principles. On
Mm.
We were founded on the Second Amendment and the ability to have weapons and stuff. Whereas most of your other countries have been around since the Middle Ages, as far as the society being there and evolving over time, and everything's been in place. We are relatively young still. Okay.
Australia
Now,
is younger than America.
oh yes, I know. I believe Australia started as what, a prison, pretty much.
It's a penal colony. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and essentially, what our fear is that if you get rid of the Second Amendment, right? And,
Mm.
and I served in our military, and
Mm-hmm.
I've been to countries where these where the people in general don't really have access to good weapons. I mean, and their rights are just trampled on. Them as human beings are trampled on, depending on where
Really?
you are, depending on where you're at in the world. Mind that.
Right.
Like if you go to where a lot of these warlords are, they have control because they have the weaponry. All right. And then they get into the government, and the government becomes corrupt, and then they have nothing. If you look what's going on in South Africa right now, they're getting ready to seize farmland without compensation or anything. They are about to boot farmers off of their land straight up. They have
I'm
no
pretty
way to
sure.
stop
I'm
it.
pretty sure that South Africa has a right to bear arms, though.
I'm not sure. Like I've seen where
Yeah.
people are saying they are. I've tried to look it up. I can't find anything definitively one way or the other.
Well, I've just
And
got friends who've been to South Africa and they bought a firearm when they were there to carry around with them. So that would actually seem to counter your case that you're pointing to a country where the rights are trampled on, but they actually have the right to bear arms. I mean,
that one
surely we
right's
could,
being trampled on, yes. If they
yeah,
decided
but
to exercise it, that's up to them.
surely those the rights have been trampled on because of South Africa and they just, there's not that much prosperity. Like Cape Town's in a water crisis.
I
Like
don't
it seems
know.
like other,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like obviously, both of us can probably find a test case of whether, in your case, there's a country with no gun control and things are going poorly,
Mhm.
or in my case, there's a country with gun control and things aren't going poorly. But that's just correlation equals causation. Does not equal causation. You need to look at the bigger picture here, and it seems to me that the things you were talking about, as you said yourself, these countries have warlords. Surely
Yeah.
that's got more to do with the rights than guns.
Yeah.
Right.
It
So then you don't need a
definitely
second amendment. You don't need a warlord.
no. No. Do you
Well,
have
why
anything
not? Why
else?
not? I
Huh?
mean, so Australia, for example, right? Like, we don't have a warlord. We also don't have a second amendment. What's going
Mhm.
on there? Like, why is it that we are not the norm?
You are not the norm?
Yeah.
I don't know. It depends where your country came from and what it established. I mean, even I can't remember who it was exactly, but there was a political official from Australia that has come
Mm,
out and commented towards the U.S. and our Second Amendment
mhm.
versus Australia's laws and their society. And even he came out and said that America was itself designed on that principle, on that foundation, whereas it may not work in America. It works in Australia, but it may not work in America. Did you
I mean,
know that there's an estimated um, 300, sorry, 20 to 30 million more guns than there are people here in the US. Okay.
yeah, it's awful. Yeah.
Yeah. So even if they wanted to go through and abolish the Second Amendment, it really wouldn't get very far because, I mean, then people would, I mean, I'm not going to lie, they'd hide them. They would still be there. There's no way to get them all out.
I mean, we had that as well. Like,
Mhm.
obviously not on the same scale because we're a smaller
Well, yeah, y'all
nation.
just had a huge
The guns out.
buyback and like 60,000 guns were turned in recently, from what I read.
Wait, so what did you say recently? Sorry.
Apparently Australia had another gun buyback
Mm.
recently,
Oh,
or
right. Yeah, yeah,
or an amnesty, and there
yeah.
was like I think it was something like 60,000 illegal guns turned in.
Mm.
Yeah, it's always going to be a
Yeah.
problem.
Well, that's just how that's how the transition would work, right? Like,
Mhm.
no major law is like a snap of the fingers and everything gets fixed. It's always just over time.
Oh yeah.
You set a goal and then you allow people to do buybacks and you allow amnesties and then
Mhm.
it takes generations. But I mean the biggest reason which they eventually go away is that once you declare something illegal like that, just the sale of it becomes illegal. So you
Mhm.
cease injecting new guns into the country. and then slowly but surely the ones which remain disappear. And the law doesn't require 100% of the guns to be gone for it to be effective. So I don't. I mean, I guess that's more like the practicality of a gun ban. I'm just wondering, like, to do with the motion which you said. Like you said that the Second Amendment is necessary for other rights.
Yes.
So far, the only difference you've got between Australia and America is the idea that America was like founded on it, I guess. So I guess I would ask the question then, well, America was founded on lots of things, but laws change over time. Why is it that that this, like the Second Amendment in of itself is an amendment, right? So it itself is changing something which didn't used to be.
Yeah, but if you look at every amendment that is in the Constitution, it is always something to add to or build on what was already there initially.
Well,
I don't think you might be able to count on one hand how many amendments, if any, have been degraded, like have downgraded a constitutional right. Everything is either built on or built out on what was already there.
Right. But I guess the question is surely how important a right is not just to do with the chronology, but it's more just to do with how legitimate the actual right is. So, for example, I believe that freedom of speech is the most important right, and that's got nothing to do with the chronology of which one was founded first. I don't. And for example, that would mean like, because if I cared about the chronology, if I was like, oh, well, it's only important if the country was founded on that principle. That means that when I travel to like America, for example, I'd be like free speech #1. But if I traveled to like England, it would be downgraded. Surely the more sensible way to evaluate how important a right is just to kind of logically interrogate actually how important the right is, regardless of when a country realized it was important.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay, so then the whole America was founded on the Second Amendment is kind of irrelevant. Surely it's more just, it's possible it's a good idea, but there are logical reasons other than it was founded on it, which make it a good idea, not just the chronology.
Well, also another reasoning that a lot of us have behind it is without the Second Amendment, how do you expect to be able, in the event that it's necessary, to protect the First Amendment, the Third, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, and so forth?
Right.
If there's no way to defend that, then
what
what's
about
going to
voting?
happen? Huh?
What about voting?
Voting?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think voting's the most dependable system here in the U.S. at the moment.
Yeah, well, like at the moment, but I mean, like, look, people felt that their rights were under threat, and Trump made it despite being a complete outsider against one of the most established candidates. So clearly it does something, like. So I'm like, why is voting like, it certainly works in Australia, for example, like our rights by and large are not trampled on.
Voting is, first off, our younger generation, they tend to do a lot of talking, but very little voting. Okay. Secondly, the ones who seem outspoken, you can probably ask most of them if they've ever voted, and they'll probably tell you no. All right. And secondly, it seems to be a common trend here in America that once they see the headline, that's the whole story. They don't read anything else. At least that's what it seems to be. People seem to jump to a lot of conclusions based on a mob opinion rather than actual details. So when it comes down to voting, they're following whoever sounds the most in line with what they think and what they currently know. Does that make sense?
So what you're saying is that even if the action of voting was effective, people are often misguided in how they apply that action. Would that be kind of an accurate summation of what you're saying?
Yes, they're often misguided on where they are putting their vote to and who they're giving the authority to.
Why does that problem disappear when it comes to like an armed rebellion? So I could say, for example, you want people to wield their guns against a possible tyrannical government, I'm assuming, or a possible government trying to impede on rights.
Oh, no, that's really not the primary thing. I think the modern stance on it is it's my right to defend my family, myself, or someone who can't defend themselves in a situation.
So why couldn't it be the same? Why couldn't it be the case that, for example, somebody who was seeking to do that, defend themselves, defend their family, was similarly misguided by all of the headlines? Like they suffered all the same problem the problem voter had. An example I could think of here was like George Zimmerman, right? Like, so this is a guy who was so convinced by the media that there was a real like kind of security problem in his neighborhood that he shot a kid just just wandering around, you know? So like, it seems to me that if your problem with voting is that people can sometimes vote badly because they're misinformed, well, that it seems to then follow that people could also shoot badly or defend badly because they're similarly misinformed. That's not really a problem with the action. That's just a problem. That's like an information problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, if someone goes out and commits a crime, they're obviously very misinformed. I mean, in my
Mm,
opinion, that was a crime. I don't know why they let him off on it.
mm.
But oh, I completely lost my train of thought. I was thinking, I had
No,
something.
sorry.
Oh, um, well, here in the U.S., when it comes to guns and Second Amendment, the big reason why a lot of people want to, well, they say they're not trying to get rid of it, but the current assault weapons ban that is proposed
Mm,
actually bans every modern handgun made since the mid 80s.
yeah.
Even most styles of actual hunting um, rifles. They
Mm,
don't realize that.
yeah.
All they're seeing, oh, is it Ben's the big bad AR-15, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the Democrats' dream backdoor gun grab because
Yeah.
everything would fit their criteria of a military characteristic or being semi-automatic. Okay,
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now,
I guess that, look, I guess from my perspective, I'm just kind of like, well, like one, I actually, I don't believe that the Democrats are like, I don't think they literally want to take every gun in a way which is like, ha, gotcha. Like I can agree that that might be their like end policy goal. As in maybe they start with an assault weapons and then, you know, if possible, they move to something else into something else. But that's very different to saying they're going to put an assault weapons ban and then be like, "Ha, tricked you, everyone." We, you know, that actually disqualifies all guns. But then I guess the other issue is I don't see like why, like it's a bit of a who cares question for the purpose of this debate. Like you could argue about, oh, the Democrats want to get rid of guns, and I'll be like, okay, good. You know, the real question which I'm trying to get at is that you're making the claim that you can't have other rights if you don't have the Second Amendment. And what I'm doing is I'm seeking an explanation as to how it is that there are countries like Australia that have other rights without having a Second Amendment. So yeah, and I haven't really got much of an answer other than that. Like the US was kind of founded on gun control, but we agreed the chronology wasn't important. So yeah, I guess how is it that Australians have rights without a Second
well, now we're getting into strictly opinion based, just based on knowledge. Well, from my perspective, because I don't live there. But
Amendment?
from what I would have to say to that is that it's just how y'all were started. It's how y'all were founded. It's how your society has evolved. Okay?
But we had guns when we were founded.
Huh?
We had guns when we were founded.
Yes, you were.
Yeah.
Nowhere. But as far as guns being a problem, were guns really that huge of a problem when the gun ban was enacted?
Well, it was in response. It's similar to the American narrative. It was in response to a mass shooting. It's just that. So, like, you could imagine, what was your first kind of big national news one? I think it was Columbine. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So when Australia had its Columbine moment, if you will, and it
Mhm.
was when a guy, it was at Port Arthur, a guy shot a bunch of people at a beach. Australia responded by actually banning guns, whereas America didn't. So we kind of had the same, and a lot of the same arguments were made. Like a lot of the people who were against guns were like, you know, it's my right to defend my family. You know, a lot of farmers in Australia were all like, well, like, look, we need these for, you know, we need this to do our jobs. Like this is a part of our life and a part of our culture. And then there was other arguments as well, again, about the tyrannical government stuff. So a lot of those same arguments are made, but ultimately just we banned guns. So
Yeah.
the history's it's reasonably analogous. There are of course some differences, but
Mhm.
I don't really see why those differences are like, you know, making or breaking the analogy, if you will.
Yeah. There's, so like you don't see why there's a difference between our situation and the situation that you guys had. And y'all
Yeah,
still
like
have rights, but you can't have guns. I think y'all can have shotguns, can't you?
so what we have is that you can apply for a permit for class A, B, or C firearms.
Mhm.
Most of the time, if you want to wield a firearm, you don't get to own one personally. It's like you could the range can store one which you own, if that makes sense. So
Mhm.
if you want to go to like a shooting range, they're not that popular, but if you want to go to a shooting range, the shooting range can hold a gun which you have, and then it never leaves the premises, and you can use it for recreational reasons.
Okay.
Farmers are allowed like certain guns to put down animals. But of course, you know, they tend to be like, you know, they're not semi-automatic, right? Like
Yeah.
they are one shot. And then there are kind of other things like paintball guns and like, you know, they're not actual bullet firing guns, right? They're like stuff like that and like crossbows and shit like that. You can apply for a Class C fire, and usually that's for recreational purposes or like, or you know, but you can apply, right? But the point is, there's not a huge amount of people who do. Because like they're just kind of not necessary in everyday life. But there are of course some people for whom it's important. We even have like a political party in Australia called the Shooters and Fishers Party, or the Hunters and Fishers or something. And so you know they like their voter base are kind of gun owners. You know they've all had to go through the process of applying, right? They can't just get any gun they want.
Now here's one for you. How about North Korea? They took all guns from them. They're not allowed. They basically cannot even go to the restroom without.
Yeah, but surely that's got more to do with the fact that they're all weirdly believing in this weird God King Emperor thing.
Oh, like, I know. Well, but a lot of them are forced into it too. Like they don't have a choice.
Yeah.
If you were caught speaking or doing anything that goes against Kim Jong-un, you are dead on the spot.
Yeah. So it wouldn't really make much of a difference if they had a gun because they could kill it anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So then the gun wouldn't help.
All right. So
like this is the other thing, right? Like civilians are not soldiers, you know. Like even if the North Korean people did want to rebel, like they just wouldn't be able to because the military is just far more better equipped than they are.
Oh,
and
definitely.
They're better trained and everything.
Yeah. All right. But here as far as the U.S. goes and our Second Amendment rights, did you know that there is an act that if the president ever declared it active, could literally walk up to anyone he wants to? It's called the National Defense Authorization Act. It's been around for a while, but they've added stuff to it back in the Obama administration, where if it's declared active, literally the president or anyone he delegates the authority to can, let's say if you lived here, walk to your front door and say you're a terrorist. No trial, no nothing, straight to jail indefinitely, and you basically just disappear.
Yeah, that's a problem. I agree. Yeah. So you're saying that guns would fix that?
Huh? If enough people, if the time ever arose, if enough people did, it could. Our military is only 2 to 3 million to 3.5 million strong, tops. We have over 6 million veterans in this country. If it can't, now something drastic like over the top would have to happen.
Yeah.
But if it did, we would have a force big enough to do what we had to do, and including our military. I mean, I can tell you that when the first gun scare came and like when Obama was talking about taking guns, I overheard some people saying, I'll sign out my weapon and go home. I'm not going to shoot my mom for being out past curfew. If he has, because that's the only way he'd be able to do it would be to declare martial law. So not only would the veterans stand, you'd have a lot of active duty personnel also take what they needed and go home.
Well, if active duty people were going to rebel, then you wouldn't need the civilian people to be armed because the active duty people
would still would, because I can guarantee you with the technology our military has, they could probably, if you didn't have the numbers, you could probably control the entire country with probably 50 to 100 armed drones.
Right. So I guess the question then is that what use of the guns? Like, because now what you're imagining is there's like a tipping point where like how is an armed population going to deal with an aircraft carrier? Right. So you're saying, well, like if it was just the active duty people, they wouldn't be able to deal with the aircraft carrier and all of the F-16s. But if it was the armed servicemen and all of the old veterans and people who shotguns, they would be able to. Like why? That doesn't really make any sense. Like the technological advantage isn't like one F-16 is worth.
Definitely, yes. Like but even us. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's not like an F-16, for example, is equal to like 100 people, like infantrymen, like it is in a video game. It's like one tank is just like or like if you got a bunch of them or a bunch of aircraft carriers and stuff. It doesn't matter how many people you throw at that. It's just that you need more than people. You need other technology to win. So yeah, so I just don't understand how an armed civilian population would be at all useful.
Well, that's also the most unlikely situation we could think of too.
Yeah,
that's like way out there. Like crap has hit the fan, and it's game over.
Yeah, but that kind of proves my point, right? Because if it's really unlikely, then why would you? Then you don't really need to protect against it.
Because, as I said earlier, it's also the right to defend ourselves with what we deem necessary to do so.
Right.
In
Defend
everyday life.
from what? Oh, so now it's not the government. Now it's just criminals.
Now it could, yeah. I'm saying like the most realistic scenario would be against criminals.
Okay.
Especially here in America.
Okay, so just to kind of deal with one thing at a time, if we can. So do you kind of agree that the whole like tyrannical government thing is highly unlikely and the guns wouldn't be that useful, or do we just want to kind of agree to disagree on that and then move to criminals?
For the most part, I tend to say that it's possible, or that it wouldn't be possible for a government to turn on us and a full tyrannical government regime come down on us.
Yeah.
But then, sometimes when I see certain stuff going on, I'm like, oh my God, what are they doing? Now, as far as taking away certain rights and stuff, I mean, I believe it's in Germany. They have people invading. Well, essentially, all of the immigrants is flooding into their country and whatnot. They've actually established no-go zones. They have censored certain things from their news outlets, so not to offend them. So your free speech is being pressed upon there. They can't stop the illegal immigration because they're just letting them flood in, create their no-go zones, take over entire communities. The people can't even stop them.
So which country are you talking about?
I believe this is Germany. Like there
Right,
are
so
no-go zones and all that stuff. Like a German reporter went in and did filming there just to show it. And
right.
they're
So what
trying
you're
to hide
saying
it.
is that if the
If they
German
were in our
population was
society,
armed, they would be able to charge into these zones and shoot immigrants?
if not any immigrants, like these no-go zones where they're violent, like literally, if you walk in there and you're an outsider and a woman, they are said to be assaulting, raping, doing whatever they want to whomever they want. The police won't even go in there.
Yeah, look, I think you're conflating just stratification with like local, like this weird local martial law or something. Like, so obviously it's a pretty common feature of like Western societies that immigrants tend to be dumped all in the same area because it's much like, just the locals. Like, so for example, you can imagine if the US was flooded with a ton of immigrants, most people probably wouldn't want a bunch of immigrants in their community. So often what governments will do is they'll direct all the immigrants to a single kind of stratified community. And so it kind of gives the impression, like that on one hand can be spun as the immigrants have taken over an area. But I can tell you, like they're not rich areas, they're basically given all of the areas which no one else wants to live in. And the stratification is really because the citizens don't want to associate with them that much. It's not like it is almost by the German citizens' preference that stratification happens. So, like and that's a very different story to the no-go zones, right?
But that goes into loss of rights of the current citizens, because now these people that have lived in those communities their entire lives, they've got to move because they're being attacked on their property, which they're not able to protect, which is an inalienable right to protect oneself and property.
Okay, hang on. Let me just clear up the narrative again. The German people, the reason they stratify the immigrants is because the German people want them stratified, right? Like they're not. It's how do I say this? You're kind of acting as if there was like a community of German people and the immigrants rolled into their town and took over and kicked out all the Germans. But that's not how it tends to happen.
They are leaving voluntarily because their towns they grew up in are going to crap.
No, yeah, okay, but that's what I'm saying. That's not really how it's not like they put all the immigrants in the really prosperous towns and the prosperous towns were least prosperous. They put the immigrants in the non-prosperous towns, which none of the Germans want to live in the first place. Like that's how immigrants tend to be treated.
No, they tried doing that. They actually built housing for immigrants, and this was all over the news. They literally were dumping their trash wherever they wanted, and then were going around and complaining about it, and then decided to all get up and move to wherever they pleased.
But how are they just going to get up and move to wherever they please? Like I don't know. I don't know if you've ever tried to buy a house, but like you can't just like You know what I mean? You can't just go to a wealthy suburbs, for
I'm
example,
not
tend to
saying
have
wealthy
high housing
suburbs. No,
prices.
not by any means.
Right. But even like you're talking about people who have fled and, like when you talk about immigrants, you're talking about people who have fled with whatever they could carry. I don't understand how they're buying up all this property in even kind of middle class suburbs. Like how does
Okay.
this happen?
All right. Well, let's use something a bit less, I guess you could say, one with a bit less angles and views to look at. Let's look at something
Uh-huh.
simple.
Uh-huh.
Iraq, U.S. pulls out. What
Mm.
happens? ISIS comes in and takes everything within 6 months.
Yeah.
How was that?
Well,
Because
because
they
the people had guns though. Like when
barely,
ISIS
barely,
first
no, no, no. They had
when
the
ISIS
crap.
first rolled into Mosul,
The people had
the
the crappiest guns you could hope for in an actual modern battle. ISIS was actually equipped. They weren't. They are kept poor. They are kept in the dark. And what
no,
happened
I
was, is when ISIS came rushing in, they had no way to effectively stop it. They lost their property. They had to convert or die. That's every inalienable right known to man, and they had
I
no
think
way to
this is
stop it.
a very niche scenario because you're talking about a nation which was crippled by the fact that it had been invaded by the US and had a military who was not properly trained yet and
Oh, they were
expected to
properly
defend areas.
trained the whole time we were there, up until we pulled out. Yes,
I
yes, they
agree that
were.
the US were in the process of training them, but they were not battle ready. And then they were expected to defend areas which they didn't really care about because most of the kind of, like if you look at the demographics of Iraq,
Mhm,
most of the kind of rural areas are Sunni and the cities are Shia. And so
mhm.
the military didn't really have much of like a will to defend the land, if you will.
Mhm.
So that's got nothing to do with citizens owning guns. That's just got to do with the fact that the police and military, who in any other nation, like had it been the US, would have stood their ground because they
Okay,
were trained and cared about the land, didn't. So that's
and
got
now,
nothing. Yeah.
now go to history and compare
Right.
their situation of having crappy weapons, not really battle ready, to America 1 to 2
Right.
years before the Revolutionary War. It was the same boat. It took us 1 to 2 years to collect battle ready weapons to
Mm,
actually fight off the British before the war even started. We had to sneak them, find them, and everything just to get them in there, because the
mm.
British would purposely sell us the crappiest hunting weapons you could find. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Because they didn't want to risk us being able to go against them.
okay, but there's a difference there, and the difference is that in that case, the Americans actually wanted independence, like it was their
Yes,
home they were defending. Whereas what I'm
yes.
saying with the Iraqi situation, when I like the reason ISIS was able to take a lot of those areas is that the military didn't really feel like the place they were defending was worth it. Does that kind of make sense? Like, you get a lot more will to defend yourself when it's like revolution and stuff than
Yeah,
when
but that
you're
would be
fighting.
like assuming every man, woman, and child didn't really give a crap about how they thought or their property or nothing, and just said, "Oh, well, we don't want it. We'll just lay down and take it." Nobody does that. A whole country
Well,
of people is not going to do that.
but you got to remember, like there's a like ISIS again. ISIS is a unique scenario for tons
Mhm.
of reasons. Like a lot of the people, a lot of the men, women, and children you're talking about weren't fans of the Iraqi government either. So it's not like it's like you're kind of acting as if there was this totally unified Iraq, which really wanted to defend Iraqi borders from all outside invaders, but they just didn't have the weapons to do so. But that just isn't true.
They
Like
didn't
the
have the
Iraqi government,
capability.
but the Iraqi, yeah, but like when you want people to act, there are two elements, right? There's
Mhm,
incentive and capacity, right?
mhm.
You're mostly talking about capacity, but the things you're talking about are actually incentive problems. Like the Iraqi government has been suffering from legitimacy issues from the moment it was conceived,
Mhm.
because, for example, it's a power sharing agreement between a bunch of different Muslim facts who sections who don't really have that much fondness for each other. The fact that the power sharing agreement wasn't representative of the actual demographics of the country, the fact
Mhm.
that it was set up by the United States government, the United States were previously invaded, so it seemed like they were just puppets of Western power. Like, there's a lot of stuff that, like, you know what I mean? There's a
Yeah,
lot of
there's a lot
of
of factors in anything
factors.
like
Yeah.
that.
So it just seems that painting guns has been the thing which would have changed everything. Is just a bit dishonest, to be honest.
No, I'm saying more capable weaponry, more capable skill.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, it doesn't matter how capable you are if you don't actually want to use it.
Now, so getting back to, the Second Amendment is necessary, and without it, we lose all of our rights. Here in
Yeah.
the U.S.,
Mm.
it's a slippery slope, especially here because honestly, like our politicians, they're greedy, they're self-involved. That's just the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
America is a power-hungry nation. The
Yeah.
people who run it are extremely power-hungry for the most part. Not all of them, but for the most part. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, I don't think it would ever be an outright, straight up freaking, hey, we're taking all your rights. Go
Hmm.
home. It'll always be something backdoor. Backdoor. Okay?
Hmm.
If you start with the Second Amendment,
Hmm.
where does that leave the people 50 years down the road, 100 years down the road, once everything's been eroded completely?
I mean, I reckon that what the
And
again,
it's
it's an
happened all
insidious,
throughout history.
but it hasn't. Like, you just look at Australia and you look at most of the Western world, which is banning guns. And the reality is that yes, I agree that politicians are very self-interested, but
Yeah.
what you're acting as if tyrannizing the population would further their interests. Like, that's not
Okay.
true. So
Okay.
for example, most politicians, you know how they enjoy their power? By getting rich. Getting rich is an
Yes.
easy way. Yeah. And it's very hard to be rich in a country
Mhm.
which isn't producing anything. It's very hard to be rich in a country where the people feel like like they're basically slaves. What
Mhm.
what what the way to get rich, and the way politicians have done it, isn't by taking people's guns away. And that's why they probably, never really have much of an incentive
No, no,
to.
no. They wouldn't
Like,
get rich off that. It would come to then at that point, then they could start filtering out, some of like start to slowly I can't. I have a speech impediment, but they could slowly erode the First Amendment following that with, okay, well, but you're not allowed to say anything negative about this big pharmaceutical company because they just filled my pockets last week. So
right.
everything on that has to be filtered and censored out of all media outlets.
Okay,
If
but
they start doing that,
hang on there, but there are competing. I mean, there are competing interests there, right? So
Mhm.
one party might do that, but then the other party who wants to be in power will hold them accountable, because you as a citizen can be pissed off about having your First Amendment rights being impeded upon without a gun, right? You can just vote the other people in. So it's
Yeah,
actually kind of always within people's politicians' mutual incentive to keep
but
that
where
free.
but where does it stop? Where would it stop? Because at the point where
Probably
people would say
guns.
this has got to stop is the point where the Second Amendment, they'd be like, I really wish we had a Second Amendment right. We are screwed. You see what I'm
Well,
saying?
no, because it probably stops at guns like it did in Australia. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we vote people in still, and if when
Yes.
both parties fuck things up, like
But even
when
your
my
own
party
government
fucks
has
it,
acknowledged the fact that the US is different in how it's operated since its start.
but no, but we haven't, because remember how I pointed out how the history of gun ownership is kind of roughly analogous. Like,
Hmm.
there's I don't quite understand why is that. So let's say, for example, the Second Amendment's gone, right? Let's just give that. You're saying
Yeah.
that if the government then tried to get rid of the First Amendment, that there's no way people could resist without the Second Amendment. What about a convention of states? What about the Supreme Court?
Here's the
What about
problem. None of
voting?
that would ever happen because in order to secede from the Union, you have to pay back every penny you have ever taken
I'm not talking
of
about
federal aid.
secession. I'm not talking about secession. I'm just saying that, like, any
That's the
president
only
who
way
tried to
you'd be
do
able to
that.
get away from it.
No. But how about this? What about just impeaching the president who wants to do that? How about voting out the Congress people? How about having a convention
Mhm.
of states and amending the Constitution? Like, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, there are a lot of policemen and a lot of servicemen who would defend the First Amendment if they were instructed to. So,
They've
I
already
don't
shown clearly that they're worried about their paycheck. There's a
really
lot more that seem to be just worried more about their paycheck. Okay.
than people's
And
rights.
a policeman's job is not to determine guilt. A policeman's job is strictly
Mhm.
it's for after the fact, basically.
I
Go
know,
into
but
the story like you're
let's
right
just get
or
the
you're wrong.
narrative right.
You're going to jail, you're not. Now, a
Yeah.
lot of them are good people, okay?
Hmm.
But then, and all we see on the media are the bad eggs, all right? But when it comes down to it, their job is just to uphold the law. So, like, even if they revoke the First Amendment,
But
they're
I'm
not
asking
hurting anyone. They're
I'm
just putting
asking
cuffs on them
how's
and
it
taking
going
them
to
to
become
jail.
law? And I'm just
Huh?
asking, how is it going to become law? Because, for example, say the Democratic Party, say there was a presidential nominee for the Democratic Party who ran on a party platform of revoking the First Amendment. Do you
Mhm.
think that that person would ever get elected?
No, actually, you would see Democrats eat each other alive over that.
Right. Okay. So then they're not getting elected. So it would require a party to lie about
Mhm.
their intentions, and then once in office, then try and revoke the First Amendment.
Yes,
Okay. So they're going to run into the Supreme Court doing that. They can't just
they
make
would
it
never
law.
straight up, but they would never straight up get rid of it. They would slowly erode it to the point it is useless.
But you
At least
can.
that's what I would do if I was a politician
Okay.
and I wanted to get rid of rights.
Sure.
I would erode it.
But the thing is that erosion, right?
Mhm.
Like tends to be, or each of those cases is tested in the Supreme Court. So
Mhm.
you could, for example, think about there are lots of wealthy people on both sides
Mhm.
who frequently fund lawyers who then and law groups who do test cases to see where the stuff. So a good example of this would be like Hobby Lobby, for example, right?
Yeah.
Where you're talking about like one cake shop owner or one like whatever shop owner with barely any financial resources at all. But then that becomes, because of a wealthy person who's concerned about their rights, a test case in the Supreme Court. So even you're just kind of just say like behind everyone's back they'll erode it and no one will ever notice. But what I'm saying is there are a lot of actually quite powerful people who do notice and have the resources to hold the government accountable at every point, and that has been demonstrated throughout history. So why won't that happen?
Why wouldn't that happen?
Yeah.
Well, theoretically, based on what some, like a lot of people think, is you have politicians such as the Clintons
Hmm.
who are who everyone believes all fingers point to being crooked as crap and are probably linked to multiple murders. Like someone was getting ready to what's the word I'm looking for? Wow, my
I don't
brain's
know if
like
they're murderers. They're definitely
testify.
corrupt.
Someone's getting ready to testify. I can't remember the guy's name for the life of me. I'm sure you can look it up and find it. He turned
Right.
up dead like 2 days before the court case. And that list goes on and on and on. But you got so many politicians that just do so much shady stuff
Mm.
that when it came down to it, it wouldn't matter. Did you know Bernie Sanders had the majority vote of the Democratic Party during the election season?
Right. Well, he
They,
didn't really, but
no, he did. Like he had the
like,
most support of the Democratic, like the people over Hillary. The Democratic
nah,
Party said no.
nah. Unfortunately, that's actually not true. Like I'm pro Bernie, but he didn't have the majority of the votes. He had the
From my
majority of the votes.
understanding, he did.
Oh, okay. I mean, look, you can look that up. It's just it's but
Mhm.
no, he did. Like, look, yeah, okay, I agree. Politicians do shady things, maybe like to
Mhm.
personally enfranchise their own campaigns, but
Mhm.
that's very different to actually instituting a law. Like, you'd have to point to an example where a politician eroded the First Amendment and nobody noticed. Like, think for example the way which even any attempt to erode the Second Amendment is so heavily scrutinized.
France did it.
Pardon?
France did it.
Yeah, I know, but that's because the people actually agreed and consented. Like it's not like the French are now turning around and being like, "Oh shit, our rights are gone. There's nothing we can do." Like
Mhm.
example, and the same as Australia, right? Like there's when people agree, the things happen.
Mhm.
But what I'm saying is that there's always a challenge. Like very rarely do people's fundamental rights go away and no one notices. There are some
Mhm.
instances, but
Yeah.
generally speaking, there's a huge bump. I think the best example probably would be Canada with like C16 and how a lot of people haven't really noticed the compelled speech aspect of it. But that in,
Yeah.
in itself has sparked a huge national debate with like Jordan Peterson and the like. So
Yeah.
you know, even the
Well,
small
Russia changed their government and no one noticed really.
well, okay, but again, I think tyrannical regimes are a bit of a
Yeah.
shell game.
Yeah.
All right, we've only got a minute left.
I
I've
know.
I've enjoyed this conversation. I felt
I
that
have
we've
too.
covered a
It's
lot of
good.
ground.
Like I haven't really done many debates myself. I'm just really getting into this. But
Yeah, well, I hope that you keep getting interested. Myself and Daniel are going to host the tournament soon on the site, so I hope to see
okay,
you in it.
cool. Yep, I'll
Yeah,
have to work on this a little more, but I appreciate your time.
no, absolutely. I appreciate your time as well, and cheers for the invitation.
Cheers, man. You have a good
All
night.
right, you too. Bye.